All right, welcome back. This is the Something Venture podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today is Josh Felser. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
So Josh is an entrepreneur. I know this part by heart. Josh built a company called Spinner and sold it for $300 million, $320 million before the first .com crash. Went on with his partner, Dave Samuel, to start another company and sold it, a company called Grouper. At the time, there were hundreds of video companies. Only a few of them got sold. One of them was YouTube, and one of them was Grouper, and it exists today as Crackle at Sony. And then he started a venture capital firm back when that was an original thing to do, called Freestyle. And before that, he went to Duke. How did a guy from Duke get you didn't go to one of the 3 approved schools?
No. So I remember it well. My kind of breakthrough, I guess, is I had my college roommate was at Wharton, and he knew that I was not getting any of the same interview opportunities he was, and so he said, "I have this one. It's at this company called Fox, and I think you should go interview for it. They're only interviewing here in Harvard and Stanford, and I think you'll probably get it." And I'm like, what are you talking about? So this is when Fox was cool, like The Simpsons and all the stuff they did in the beginning of their reign as unique television.
That's right.
And so I flew to LA, and I got the interview, and I got the job. And so that's kind of how I broke through into media. And then I kind of lasted there for a few years. And then after about 4 years or so, I started to get the new bug, a tech bug, and then I moved to Silicon Valley.
And what was Spinner? You know, it was crazy. For years, you had the Spinner logo was on this big tower in San Francisco.
Right.
And it was there for years after you sold Spinner. Like, it was probably there 10 years. You moved up to the suburbs, but it was there. It was probably
there. It was probably the best money we ever spent because it was too expensive to take it down. Yeah. And so we kind of started the company, and we sold it, and then the market crashed, and so no one had any money to replace us, so we just kept it. Yeah. It was just a lucky timing.
What was Spinner?
Spinner was really it's funny, it was a way for you to control what was going in your head while you were at work. That's kind of why we built it. Everybody goes to these boring office jobs, and you can't control the carpet, but you can control what you listen to every day. And so we decided to give people total control over their music. And so we had 150 channels of radio, and we had DJs, actual DJs, sitting in little booths, and they would create these channels, and we would distribute them to the world.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And so how did you but you're still a DJ. Music means something to you, right? Like, you didn't just start the joke is everyone starts a music company, but you started a music company and actually sold it for real money. Yeah,
I was a drummer in high school, and
do you know any good drummer jokes?
I don't. You're going to tell me one, I think.
You want to hear one?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, there's like a million drummer jokes.
I don't know any.
Oh, what was the last thing the drummer said before he got kicked out of the band?
I don't know.
Hey, guys, I've got an idea for a song.
Well, no one has said that to me yet, but it's coming. So as a drummer, I moved into my first real job was CBS Records. Yeah. I was like a little peon there, and I kind of started learning about music. And when I started, Dave and I each were starting competitive companies. Yeah. Mine was called Radio Co, and his was called The DJ. And we were both kind of just getting started. And I remember seeing Dave at a conference at the Fairmont. Looked like he was 12. Yeah. Pasty, Casper.
Still kind of looks like he's 12.
He does. Pasty, Casper looking guy, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, why don't we talk about music?" And we did. And then I think 6 months later, we decided to do it together.
And 20 years later.
23 years later.
You've still been working together.
It's got to be one of the longest partnerships in the history of tech. I'm trying to think of that's still working. So I know they're like Microsoft and Apple.
So Jonathan and I are starting a venture capital firm. So we're kind of going through what entrepreneurs have started venture capital firms together. Entrepreneurs who've worked together, not people who've worked at Facebook together.
Right.
And we came up with you and Dave, Andreessen and Horowitz.
Right.
And that was kind of it. There's a lot of people who you're like, oh, those guys were buddies, but they really didn't start a company together.
Right. It's hard to find, even to find founders who are now, venture capitalists and much less founders who've worked together before and worked together on more than one company. So it is kind of one of the things we thought we could bring to the mix of investing is that kind of unique background perspective that partnership that we have, and we've obviously added a new person to the partnership, someone I've known for 20 years, Jenny Lefcourt.
Your partnership is 1/3 women, which makes it relatively unusual in Silicon Valley.
Right.
So when you sell Spinner for $300 million, like there's not many things that get sold for that much money. There's things that get sold for 50 million, and so that's a lot of money. Like, what was that moment? Because you guys weren't rich kids out of Harvard,
right?
Mark Zuckerberg. You guys were like actually.
Yeah, we were middle class kids, and we my parents didn't have a lot of money, and neither did Dave's, and I remember when we were I never forget, we were sitting around the table at AOL, and the buyer, this guy Miles Gilburn, who was like the head of strategy at AOL back then, this is 99, he looked at me and he said, "So what's it going to take?" And he meant price. And I'm like, I had no idea. I had no idea what I was doing. And I just said to Dave, I had talked to him in advance, and I said, let's just throw out a number that makes no sense, but let's make it really precise. And I think I said $389 million. And he looked at me and he's like, you need to take a walk. And so Dave and I we took a walk together. We went into a room with one of our investors who we'd invited to be part of it because we just didn't know what the hell we were doing. And we sat down and she's like, what just happened? And like, he told us to take a walk. And then we talked about the price and everything. She said, well, where are you really? And I said, well, I think we're at $320 million. And so I think we went back into the room and he said, you took a walk. And I did something, I don't remember all the details, but I negotiated against myself, which is something that I know you're never supposed to do.
Right.
But I said, he asked me again, and I said, $320 million. And then there was silence for 5 minutes. No one moved. No one spoke. I'm kind of kicking Dave under the table, and he's staring at me. He's like basically seeing if I'm going to break. And then he looked at me in the eye and he said, we have a deal. That was wow. It was based on nothing. We had nothing. I mean, we were the biggest internet music company at the time, but we had, no revenue, we were losing money. We just had a lot of users at that time, and
that's crazy.
Held our ground.
I was talking to the venture, Josh Hanna, the venture capitalist, once. We were doing a deal, and somebody made an offer. It was something like for $25 million, and he's like, we should try to get $26 million. And I was like, he's like, that's $1 million.
Right.
Like, just because you're in $25 million world doesn't mean that $1 million stopped mattering.
We forget. We really do forget. I mean, the house I grew up in, my parents sold it. It was a huge, number. My parents sold it when they got divorced. I think it sold for like $250,000. And they kept telling me they were back then, this is going to sound horrible today, but then they're like, we know there's a drug dealer in Miami that wants this location. It's like a great, end of the road location. It's a dead end. And now I look back and I said, wow, that was a horrible thing to say. And I don't think they really meant it. Right. But we sold it for $250,000. And that was the most money I'd ever heard mentioned by someone I know.
Yeah. And so what happens when you and Dave now become immensely wealthy? Like at that moment, what do you... Because I met a lot of guys recently, or a lot of guys have become pretty wealthy and just got lost.
Right.
Like they just... And I don't feel sorry for people who just made $100 million and got lost, but they're kind of like, don't know what to do. 1 week it's yoga, the next week it's nothing wrong with yoga, but the next week it's something else. The week after that, they're collecting cars and
right. We for me, it was just more about security. I mean, I didn't really change my lifestyle that much. I just wanted financial security. I grew up my parents were middle class, but then when they got divorced, they were both worried about money, and I remember just not ever wanting to worry about money again. And so the biggest reaction I had was, okay, I'm okay. I can put this money away. I didn't really spend much of it. I really just focused on feeling safe and secure with what had just happened. Yeah. And that was the main thing I had. So I really didn't go off the deep end. I worked at AOL for 2 years, running music. And Dave then went off and he had a lot of fun. So maybe Dave had a different reaction. He was a little younger and he wasn't married.
And so now you guys do the logical thing. You do it again. You start another company again.
Right. Well, this is going to lead to I know we're going to have a conversation on Burning Man. I'm just waiting. I know you're waiting to insert it into this podcast.
Did you listen to my episode where I made fun of Burning Man?
I did. Oh, can't I'm prepped.
Oh, that's good.
So we it's funny, we had gone to Burning Man for the first time, like I think, and this is related to the company, and we had all this wonder, like really like visual wonder we wanted to share, and there was no way to do it except like with FTP transfers, right? No one wants to do that. Yeah. And so we started a company to make it easier for people to share their personal media. Yeah. And we felt we had to do it. It was frustrating for us, which is the same reason we started Spinners. Like, music sucks, radio sucks. Like, we need a better way to deliver the music people really want. And so with Grouper, we decided it was needed. There was no way for people to share the media they had.
Yeah. And so you sell Grouper, which is for like $60 million. But this is also incredible because the game was kind of over because of YouTube. Like, YouTube was kind of closing everyone out, and you kind of got an exit.
Well, the crazy thing about the YouTube conversation is, I remember at one point, Dave and I, we were building this. We'd pivoted, and we were building what is basically building YouTube before YouTube launched. Yeah. And we realized that it was all about public video sharing on the web. And we're building it, and then YouTube launched. And so we reached out to the founders and said, "Hey, we've got this team. We're building this product. We're going to compete with you. Do you want to merge?"
Yeah.
And we had this conversation with them.
Wow.
And when two startups, early stage startups try and merge, it doesn't usually go off, right? Usually someone has an ego, and maybe they're right. In this case, they were right. And they were like, we're going to just build this thing. We're going to see where it goes, and then let's keep talking. And so they did, and then we did, and they were, billions, and we were, still happy with our success, but it was nothing like theirs. Yeah. And so that's kind of the story. And I think, Amber, we were one of, like, as you said, 100 video sites, and we were near the top. We were like top 5, sure. And we were losing our minds. We couldn't beat YouTube, and so we sold.
Yeah, and you became. This is one of the things I appreciate about you on VC Twitter. VC Twitter endlessly amuses me. One of the things on VC Twitter is venture capitalists complaining about. It's the class of seed investors who do this kind of tweeting. Right. How hard their job is.
That's crazy.
And you're the one guy who says 1% of what it was like to be an entrepreneur.
So I met with this founder like maybe 2 years ago, and the founder just met with another VC who will be nameless. And in that conversation, that VC said, "I have the hardest job in the world. I have to manage an entire portfolio of companies. You just have to work on one."
Wow.
No words.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
They also complain about how much money they make because they're comparing themselves to Mark Zuckerberg. They're not comparing themselves to their $112,000 a year CEO who's trying to make payroll.
Right.
It's insane. I was in a board meeting once where some VCs who will remain nameless had a conversation about, they're like, what the benefit of having a private jet is? I was like, no, I actually don't.
Well,
your kids can run around on it was the answer.
Oh, right, yeah. right. Well, if you there's some exciting VCs to follow on Instagram who often share photos of their private jets without care. So it's
what's funny though is the Facebook and the YouTube guys stopped.
Right.
Like there were a while they're posting the photos, and I think somebody kind of said, guys, like,
yeah,
we need to kind of keep this on the down low.
It's a. I know we're going to jump around a lot on this talk, and I had a debate with Peter Pham about this, and I was on the side of, like, just go enjoy your wealth if you have it, and you don't need to show the world how rich you are. Just go enjoy it and share it with people you love, and he's like, why shouldn't they be able to show it? And I was just like, because if you're empathic, then when you show off your wealth, all the people who don't have it feel bad. And so why do you want to make people feel bad?
Yeah. And it's not that cool anyway.
Right.
Like you kind of just look like a dick. Right. And now anybody can have a private jet.
Right.
Like you can rent one for the day and like take some pictures.
I'm flying. It was like amazing. I'm flying back from LA on Sunday on Jet Suite, and it's like $60. I don't understand how it works, but it's a private jet for $60. Anyone can get on it.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
There was that brief period when you could have your own kind of black car and a driver, and now anybody with a credit card can do it.
Right.
So when you make this switch to becoming a venture capitalist, which I'm going through now, you switch from having employees to not.
Right.
It's kind of weird.
And by design, we've worked so hard at Freestyle to not have employees. I mean, we could have, our fund is big enough. We could actually add analysts and, and we are flat. It's just, Dave and Jenny and I and Molly, who's our office, everything, our operations manager. And I think, I kind of love it. I mean, I can work hard, but work from anywhere.
Well, it's weird. We've been doing it. And now, like, if on Friday I need to leave at 2:00 to do something stupid, like check out a dog at some rescue or something.
Right.
With employees, I wouldn't do it because I'd be like, well, that's setting a bad example, and I'll do it. With my partner Jonathan, I'm like, fuck all. I'll be working. I'll be working Saturday morning and not whatever it is. It's a very different feeling.
It is. You can work from anywhere. It's not that it's people mistake having flexibility about where you work. They mistakenly assume you're not working hard. And I think that while it's not entrepreneur hard, it's still, I kind of think about what I do most of the hours of the day, except when I'm really desperately trying to unplug. And I want to say too, Kent, that congratulations on your fund. I mean, you guys have known each other. You and Jonathan have known each other for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Back before Friendster?
That's how we came together.
Okay. And that was how many years ago?
15.
So that's pretty impressive. Yeah. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. And we're very different. He always said we're very different people.
For sure.
And he always says, it's not Andreessen. It's Andreessen Horowitz.
Right.
It's like you bring together two different people, and that's how it works. And so are you and Dave, like, did you ever question that you were going to keep working together? Or were you just like, this never happens, we've got to keep working together?
Every time I questioned it.
Really?
Oh yeah, every time. I mean, it's like, when you have to constantly be challenging yourself and how you move through life, right? Yeah. Whether it's, a marriage or whether it's, work relationship or really anything. It's like, okay, is this working? Is this the best that I can kind of do in this situation? And I think that's part of an entrepreneurial mindset. And so with Dave, we started a company, we sold it. I'm thinking about what to do next. I'm like, do I want to work with Dave again? Do I want to be friends with Dave? Because we started out as a work relationship. And, fortunately I said yes to both and we keep working together and it's an amazing relationship, but it's important to challenge it each time you reach these inflection points. Yeah. Just so you can think about it and do it. It's an opt-in, right? It's not an opt-out. Everything, being an opt-in, having an opt-in relationship in your life is, makes you kind of going with both feet, eyes wide open and both feet forward.
And how did you come, one of the things I've done on this podcast is when I started this, I started having on women.
Right.
And playing the fool if you're like a white guy in Silicon Valley and you don't harass anybody,
right.
You're not getting harassed. It's not that you don't think it happens. It's kind of not in your world. And I would start talking to women about that and they'd be like, oh, I'm going to come on your podcast and tell you about what happened yesterday.
Right. And,
we move on. Finally, Ellen Powell talks about what happened to her and all that. You kind of became aware that you needed to help out on this issue. Like you said, hey,
right,
women, two dudes started a venture capital firm, so great. But we need to do something about getting women in. How do you kind of think about that?
I mean, the main thing is doing it in a way with, I don't know what the right word is. The bar needs to be the same level. Right. So the women that over the years that I have talked about this, they want the bar to be at the same level as the men. They don't. But when there's a tie, I'm gonna invest in someone who is not as represented. And so, but the bar is high. So having Jenny come on as a partner, the bar was high. It was just as high. It was the same level for anyone we bring on, but it was like, wow, Jenny, we can see that Jenny is at that bar and above it.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's the important thing is not to patronize.
I struggle all the time on the podcast. I'm like, look,
right.
Nothing women like more than two white dudes talking about women. But But as I've talked to them, they're like, no, you should try to help and be an ally, and here's how you do it.
And be upfront about, like, I've told this story, my being Jewish in the South was interesting. And so half my family grew up there, and I had this moment when I was volunteering. It's a long story, but I was a forced volunteer.
Those are the opposite things,
Yes, I know. It's a long story. Had to do a little community service when I was in college.
Got it.
And I was tutoring these kids in this underprivileged area in North Carolina. And I remember I was telling one of the kids that I was heading home to Miami for holidays, and he said, "Merry Christmas." I said, "Well, I'm Jewish." And he literally stood on top of his chair, and he looked in my hair, and he looked for my horns. And you see, this sounds ridiculous to you, like nobody does that in this modern age, but he did. And when I asked him about it, he said, "My parents told me that all Jews had horns." So, like, yeah, I'm a white guy, but I've had my own exposure to behavior that is just due to my ethnicity and race or whatever. And so I think it doesn't make me understand what it's like to be a woman in tech, but it does make me sensitive to it.
Yeah, it resonates.
Right.
And so how did you find Jenny?
Jenny grew up in Miami.
Yeah.
Jenny's best friend growing up was the sister of one of my best friends. And so we kind of knew each other, and we moved out here. We moved here, Jenny moved here, and then we reacquainted through this same friend and just started building a friendship. Yeah. And we've traveled to, Bali together. Our families have. And I remember we were sitting around we hired Joyce Kim as a principal at Freestyle, and she went off to do amazing things in crypto. And then we kind of were interviewing again, and we're like, we like the vibe. We want to have a more diverse group. And then I was like, I just had this eureka moment. I was like, oh my God, Jenny left court.
Yeah.
And it happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Have you ever met Monique Woodard?
No.
I had her on my podcast. I've had 2 black VCs on my podcast,
Yeah.
so I think I've had them all.
Right.
She started in Miami. She's a venture capitalist now.
Right.
Building her own firm. Yeah. And she was in the Miami music scene, and that's how she... Yeah, listen to that podcast. It's
I should meet her. I mean, I'm from Miami and loving music.
Yeah, and she's got she's got a really interesting thesis, and she gets discriminated against, like Charles Hudson. I mean, she talks about it. It sucks, but...
Yeah.
So we come now to Burning Man. I was just kidding
when
people doing drugs and having sex in the desert was how I summarized it. The art looks amazing. But when did you first kind of come to the experience, and what does it sort of mean to you? I was kidding when I was making fun of it.
It's worthy of making fun of. I mean, it is. It has it has everything. It has people that are posing. It has some, plug and play camps, and it has people who appreciate it for the things that I, the same way that I do. And so it's really just a place to go to unplug from the world and to experience amazing creativity in a place where you can be whoever you want to be in that moment and not be judged.
Right.
That's kind of it. It's got a little of SF MoMA. It's a little of music festival. It's a little of a masquerade ball and a rave. It's all those things in one. If it was just one of those things, I would never go. I wouldn't have gone again. I've been, this is 19 years in a row.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot.
Right. So my theory about Burning Man, one of them was that it's just people who didn't do drugs in college. Like you do psychedelics in college, you're like, whoa. And then you're like, okay, it's just psychedelics. But if you hadn't done, and when you first do it, you're like, oh my God, I've seen God, my life is different, whatever. And later on, you're like, this is just a bunch of fun.
Right.
My theory was it was a bunch of middle-aged people who just hadn't done it in college, now having that experience.
So I would be a violation of that hypothesis of yours, since I did experiment in college. Yep. It's not about, it really isn't about the drugs. I mean, it can enhance it, but it's really about the full experience. There are many days when I'm completely sober and I'm just wandering around looking at the art and the creativity that, that is applied to Burning Man for a week, and then it disappears. So it's really all those things working together. It's kind of and it is, I know in your podcast, you're like, they come back and they can't describe it. And you had this great saying. It's like, if Lewis Carroll can describe like a fantasy land, how can, and I can describe it. And it really is kind of this mixture of art, music, like a masquerade ball and like a therapy session all in one.
Yeah. And what can you buy there? Is it just
coffee and ice?
So Founders Den is kind of like that. We only have...
I'm going to quote you on that kit.
We offer water and coffee free, and that's basically it.
Right.
What do you do at Burning? Do you... Because everyone contributes... This is actually very cool. Everyone contributes something, right? You're like, hey, I'm going to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and milk, and it's going to be cold milk and peanut butter jelly sandwiches in the desert for everybody.
Right.
Like that's pretty cool.
It's kind of upped its game a little bit. Now you might find like oysters and caviar or something, but we bring a massive what was a school bus to Burning Man. It's now it's called the Smile High Club, and we apply our creativity to its design and its construction, and we bring it, and we basically are a mode of transport, dancing, and wonder for thousands of people every year, because it holds a lot of people, and so I think that's our gift to everybody is we bring this beautiful vehicle that people can enjoy.
And do you DJ there?
I do.
That's what kind of music is it?
I do a mix of I bring in the old stuff. I guess you would call it funky house, but I'll bring in I'll play EDM, veer between EDM and hip hop, but everything I do has kind of a modern mix to it.
You said a strange thing to Harry Stebbings when you were on his podcast you were quoting Rush, which is great. By the way, if you read Neil Stephenson, you also listen to and like Rush.
Yes.
I think that's just I think just makes sense, right? Yeah. You would like 2112. Right. You said, this was before your time, and you were right. So that's such an odd thing to say, because when I was a kid, someone would say, hey, there used to be this band called The Clash.
Right.
They're great.
Right.
And I'd go, oh. And they'd be like, there's this thing you can buy. It's an album. They recorded what they did. I just found that very odd, an odd thing to say. There's this great band, and since they're not playing right now, you don't know them.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. Where would you find them? You're not going to. Where would you? Discovery. So, music discovery is broken. No one's fixed it. So, if you try and discover something like this that you might like based on your preferences for today's music, you can't. There's no place. There's no way to get matched to some old classic rock band if you're listening to something modern. So the old stuff gets lost. Music discovery of old music is kind of broken, and no one has a plan to fix it that I know of.
Yeah. Well, we can fix it for Harry Stebbings. Hey, Harry Stebbings, go buy a copy of 2112 or Hemispheres.
Right.
Okay, so don't buy a copy. Go listen to 2112 or Hemispheres.
Ease them in. You got to ease them in. So I don't know if I would go. You maybe go do a more popular.
That's true.
Album
the first song on 2112 is Cygnus X1. I think it's 14 minutes.
Yeah, maybe that's a little hard.
That might be a little bit much for the beginning. So into this mix, Twitter comes along. What does Twitter mean to you? VC Twitter, so we've covered my job is too hard, I don't make enough money. The third one that we make fun of is they describe simple math and act like it's hard. They'll say, if you own 5% of a company and sell it for $100 million, that doesn't return a $25 million fund, which is literally saying $5 million is less than $25 million, which everyone literally knows, but they act like it's hard math. What does Twitter mean to you? Do you tweet frequently? Politics is the topic often.
Yeah. It's like saying, what does email mean to you? Honestly, it's become kind of, it has so many meanings, it's hard to describe them all for me, but it's, it's a mix of, I don't use Facebook. I rarely use Instagram. I'm really not it's Twitter has become, in the digital world, is kind of part social network, part AMA, part product discovery. It has many use cases for me, and some of them are giving and some of them are taking. Yeah. It's kind of all of it. So it's because I kind of focus most of my efforts in my digital communications, I focus on Twitter, email, and text.
Yeah. And what do you make of, as I read your tweets, the political season that we're in? We have Gavin Newsom becomes governor of California.
Woohoo!
That seems pretty good.
Yeah.
I like that guy. I saw him once, and he said something like, I have a gun, but I'm for gun control. And I don't smoke pot, but I'm for legalizing pot.
Right.
This is something like that. It's like,
I don't know if you can tell this story. He if he listens to your podcast, it'll be fun. It'll be funny. But when I met our governor, he was the LG, and
lieutenant governor,
right? And he was working out in my gym, and
he's a good looking guy.
He is. He's a fit guy. I'm a little stronger than he is, but he was just doing this one exercise again and again and again, and it was this like a leg. I can visualize it, but I can't describe it. So the leg exercise where you're seated and you're basically your legs moving out and in, out and in, and he's doing it like a lot. And I'm with my trainer at the time, and I'm like, we got to talk to him. He's doing it. He cannot exercise like this. It's not healthy and it's not appropriate, right? So we walk over and I say, hey, I'm Josh. It's my trainer, Jeff, and we need to help you. Like, you can't do this. Like, you can't be LG and do this.
Right.
And so he looks at me like, who's this nut that's come up to me? And then we talked a little more, and he's like, okay, what should I do? And we ended up working out together for a little over a year.
Wow.
And helped him expand his workout regimen. And we talked politics, but I have no agenda with him. And it was early enough that it was just a free and open discussion. And his thoughts were amazing. Like, they were so authentic and real and exactly kind of what I believe. And I'm like, this is the kind of person we need running this state and this country. That
was when he was here at Founders Den, he would take meetings with, the groups that you take meetings with. And you could just tell there were these they'd be fired up, they'd be the farm subsidy, some interest group. And of course they're super fired up about it. And he would sit through the meetings and he would absorb it. And it seemed like any topic, like Elizabeth Warren has a plan, like he really does have a plan. Like he's heard all the policy wonks and he knows, like, he could bore you to death with it. Right. Which is just perfect for him being like a governor.
He knows what has to be done, but understands the way to deliver the message and when to deliver it. Yeah. Because if you're constantly talking about what needs to be done, but you're not delivering it in a way that people can take it in, it falls on deaf ears. So he has, one of the things that he had mentioned that's broken in our state, really broken, is procurement. But right now, no one cares. There are bigger issues than procurement, which is how the government awards bids for, we're wasting, billions and millions of dollars on procurement. And he knows it needs to be fixed. And that's a great way to plow money back in education, other things. But he has to time that. Like, when does he talk about that? Right now we have bigger issues. We have, our state is
on fire.
Existence is being threatened.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Joe Garofoli, it hasn't come out yet, but Joe Garofoli, the San Francisco Chronicle writer, on the podcast talking about him. And what a balance Gavin does. He publicly hates Donald Trump. And they both call each other clowns. Right. But then when it comes down to, like, hey, he needs the aid, California needs the aid for the fires, Gavin somehow calls him. Right. They have some kind of conversation that is apparently civil, and the money comes.
They're from what I understand, they're very civil when they are live and talking to each other. Yeah. And I think that's probably because our president, when he wants to be, is very charming. Yeah. And our governor is a realist and knows what he needs for this state. Yeah. And so they managed to work it out.
Yeah, and I think they both know what game they're playing, right? Like, it's good for Donald Trump to make fun of the California liberal gay marriage governor guy, and it's obviously Gavin thinks what he thinks about Donald Trump. Like, it works perfectly. And Gavin, by the way, I was so impressed when I learned he's dyslexic. Yes. So when he does that talk that Bill Clinton wouldn't have looked at 2 seconds before it went up on the teleprompter, he spends a couple hours, like, memorizing it and working it through.
And he does write his own, he has his own thoughts. I was in a small group. I was lucky enough to be in a small group with him. He was really, really letting down the political guard, which is hard to do if you're a politician. And the thoughts he was expressing were all his own, and they were amazing. Even fighting for gay marriage before it was cool, fighting the NRA.
And when the Democratic Party asked him not to, because Bill Clinton was running for president, and they asked him to stand down, because they were going to get tagged with it.
And, he speaks his mind, and he does it in a way that people can hear. And I think both those things are important.
Yeah. Do you think he'll step in this political season and run for president?
I don't think so. I think I would imagine, I have no information on that. I would imagine that he is going to, he's got a lot to do in his current role. Yeah. And he wants, he loves his state and he wants to help fix it. Yeah. And it needs a lot of fixing.
Love having him there. Yeah. And what do you make of the broader politics. Donald Trump becomes president. What do you? Does that impact your life? Are you like, no, I'm nestled away here in Silicon Valley? And
I mean, it impacts all of our lives, but it's probably a whole podcast on its own to get into that. But it's one of the, it's many things, but it is also the state of our country. So we can, we should blame Donald Trump for much, but the truth is that we elected him. Our country elected him, and we did look at how that happened. And there are many books that have been written about this, but that's more interesting, is to focus on how it happened.
Yeah.
And that is not a conversation I'm ready to go into today, but I think we all, we live in California. We're not separate from it. He's trying to take away our EPA restriction, limits. Like you can't hide from it.
Yeah. What do you take any, not responsibility, but as you look at what the companies in Silicon Valley do, and many of them just automate away jobs, or automate jobs down to the point where they're not that fun anymore, not fulfilling anymore. Is Silicon Valley responsible? Or is it like, look, somebody's going to build the factory robot and there's going to be a new kind of a job out there?
I mean, we're in a revolution, and you can't. It is inevitable. Automation's inevitable, but is it? I don't know if it's the private sector's responsibility. It certainly is the public sector's responsibility to care for its constituents. And I think if we don't have a broader policy on, retraining, and we're going to have chaos.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I look at it. Maybe it is also a public-private partnership, but at the very least involves the government to try and figure out, how do we help people? This is unprecedented.
Yeah.
The technology train's not going to stop, and how do we deal with that? And there's a lot of finger pointing going on, versus I do think that it probably needs to come from a more public good kind of place.
Yeah.
I typically am not for big government, but in this case, I don't see any other way.
I read a story recently. I was reading the book about the Koch brothers. The political part's fascinating, but also just the company they built, like this insane fertilizer, oil, everything company. And there's this union that they just ground down.
Yeah.
Unions are democratic. And they'd ground them down, and then the union now has, like, you run a forklift around the factory, and then if you're not hitting your points every 2 minutes, it just like sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And every time they go to negotiate, the company negotiators just kill the amateur union negotiators, and they lose their health care, and they end up getting like a penny. Like, it's just terrible. And then Donald Trump comes along and says, your life is terrible, screw the man. And they all voted for him.
Right.
Not at your MAGA, watch Fox News, whatever level, but on the just getting ground down in their crappy factory, job that didn't used to be crappy.
Right.
And that was like the first time I was like, all right, I'm not on your side at all, but this is the first time I kind of felt the human part to that.
It's hard because most of us, I don't believe that he cares.
No.
And so, but he's saying what he needed to say to get elected. He found an opening. Yeah. So it's hard to, so it's like, what do you do? He's disingenuous, but it's a real issue. And so that's why I'm saying we should look at the real issues, not him. We talk about, the phenomenon of Donald Trump in office. It's as you said, what are the issues that he played on to get elected? And I think trying to help those people that were so desperate they voted for him,
right,
versus like just spending too much time dissecting him.
Right. Because that is the frustration. You're like, yeah, right, but he said it, but he's not going to save your job. And you're lost, like, off in the rally. So back here in Silicon Valley, what do you, so how's it changed since you became a venture capitalist? Like, how has the Valley changed?
Failure's become cool.
Yeah. Failures, let me tell you, not cool.
No, it's not.
Failed. It's not cool.
It's not cool.
Mark Andreessen's like, we don't want to fail. Like, it happens. Right. It's okay, but don't try to fail. Try to succeed.
Well, it's people mistake, like, there's a silver lining in failure, right? But it's just a fucking lining. It's not. It's a lining, right? There's the body, right? Yeah. So the silver lining is that you learn. Yeah. You learn probably more by failure than by succeeding, but that's the silver lining. It's not the body. Yeah. The body sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it really sucks. And so, and you should be afraid of failure because it sucks. So people who get too politically correct on that are kind of lose me. And I also think that and again, most of the entrepreneurs we work with, they really care. They get that they have employees. They have probably friends and family that have invested in them. They want to succeed and they don't want to fail. There's a group of entrepreneurs that are more like, like starting companies is a hobby, and so they can just go on to the next company. Like, oh, this one fails, I'll go to the next one. We don't work with those entrepreneurs. They're a minority of the entrepreneurs out there, but they're out there and they can give other entrepreneurs a bad name. And for those entrepreneurs, failure is not a big deal because you just kind of like, okay, turn this one off, turn the next one on.
Yeah. I had Kelly Fitzsimmons on, who wrote the book Startuplandia, and it's about depression in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And she pointed out that there's some study that says people who become entrepreneurs are actually 2 or 3 times more susceptible to things like depression, anxiety. But Silicon Valley is this weird world where everyone's just killing it. Like everybody you meet's just killing it and flying their private jet.
Right.
And you're just like, I'm the only one. Like, I'm the only one struggling to figure out how to pay that engineer, before she goes to whatever.
Yeah, it's a very male, like crushing. It's such a male phrase. I remember we were, and I'm going to come to mental health in a second, but we were looking to hire a woman at Freestyle, and we were making an effort, and we wrote a job description, and I remember like there were no women applying, and I'm like, what did we do wrong? We're doing all the right things. We're trying to change the culture at Freestyle, make it more diverse. And I remember I asked about 10 women in venture to have lunch with me and to please help me because I obviously was doing something wrong. And the first thing they looked at was the language in the description. And it was written by a woman, by the way, but it was like crushing it. It was indicative of what you would find in the description. And they're like, no woman's going to apply to this job. It's like you're looking for a fraternity brother. Mm-hmm. And so we just changing the language helped us change the ratio of women to men applying. And even though we ended up bringing on Jenny, we received a ton of great applicants at that moment. So, it's but back to mental health. It's very male to just push down any distractions to growth, right? And focus on being optimistic but that is inevitably going to come crashing down. Like you can't be. Maybe you get lucky and things are constantly working, but the second you have something falls out, something isn't what you hoped it would be, that can trigger kind of some of what you just talked about, depression, anxiety, stress. It's only when everything is like at Spinner, everything was like, we did everything right. We got lucky also. And we were just a rocket ship all the way to the moon and it worked out. The second company was so stressful and so created so much anxiety within me that I got sleep apnea, which is a longer story, but it was a weird case of like a stress-induced sleep apnea, which even like Stanford couldn't diagnose and the UCSF did, right? And so I tried to hide it, but it came out as sleep apnea, stress that is. Mm-hmm. So today, there's never been more attention on this issue, but we have such a long way to go. But there is, founders are, when you have a stressed environment, you're going to be more susceptible to mental health issues because you're stressed.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, and it's a different, like being a venture capitalist, it's just a different kind of stress. Like we have to worry about, you have LPs and you have meetings and things like that, but you don't have the weight of like an employee looking at you going, it's going to work, right? Like this is a good life choice.
Well, you have your entire, especially if you don't have any money, everything you have is riding on this one company.
Yep.
One company. Yeah. And that one company is all riding on you. So it's like, as a venture capitalist, you have all your money riding on many companies, and you're not the one who's responsible for the company. You're responsible for your fund, but so you have all this risk that's spread out across all these companies. It's portfolio risk, right? So it's incomparable. It's incomparable. And there's another VC who, whenever I talk about this on Twitter, he always pops up and he's like, oh no, it's you're discounting the stress that we as venture capitalists feel. And I'm like,
nope,
I'm not. It's there, but it's a fraction of what entrepreneurs feel. And I can't imagine, if you're saying that your stress is equal, why an entrepreneur would apply to you for capital.
Absolutely not.
Pitch on capital.
Yeah, one of the forms of entrepreneur we get is the person who's been at like Stanford, then Facebook. Like
Right.
they've had this series of like just wins, like, oh, Stanford, I struggled to get a B plus, and
Right.
Facebook, like everything just it's rocking, like they're dominating the world, and and they're really good in a room, and you look at it and you go, man, I don't know when and your resume like, and
Right.
they raise money all the time,
Right.
but you go, man, when you are losing, your customers like fires you and all that, like you're gonna crumble.
And it's true for a lot of, there's this weird, like, some of those kinds of entrepreneurs though, that have been athletes,
Yep.
they can actually understand what happens when you're not winning, when you lose a race, when you lose, they have this, so there is a group of that kind of more like blue blood entrepreneur that has experienced hardship, but in a different way. And so those, like, I can invest in an entrepreneur that comes up through that world, provided they have some other life experience where they've had to deal with failure.
Yeah. What do you most look for when you're sitting down with an entrepreneur? Like, what do you try to invest in more women, or is that like a?
We try to invest in great entrepreneurs, yeah. And we do feel like it's our obligation to increase, like to spread the money around to have a diverse portfolio. What's been interesting is that I would say the last 5 entrepreneurs I've backed are not minorities in the Valley, but minorities elsewhere. It's kind of interesting, but no longer. So India, Sri Lanka, Egypt, like there's this new, so it's funny, if you look at our portfolio, we're probably minority white. I mean, the CEOs, wow. But no, if you apply, when you apply to college, like I took my kid on her college trip last year, and the colleges say we're 60% people of color, and they count Asian, Indian, Hispanic, and so I think while the Valley has this, there no longer is, if you're from India and you're an entrepreneur, you're no longer in a minority,
right?
But elsewhere in the country, you are.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, Charles Hudson says that he sort of has a tiered system for if you contact him. So he's like, if you went to Stanford Business School, you should know how to network your way to me.
Right.
If you went to college in Kentucky and you send me a cold email, that's also okay. If you send me a cold email and you went to Stanford Business School, right, that doesn't comport.
I'm okay with cold emails of all kinds, from all walks of life, from all types of people, right? But what I want to see is that you understand enough about business to actually have done some homework.
Yeah.
And so if you do some homework and you say, hey, I see that you started this music company, or you're investing in companies like X, or wow, I love Patreon, then I'm going to respond.
Yeah.
But I would say half the time it's like a form letter.
90%. I'm shocked.
And so I don't care where you're from. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have infinite time. I can't respond to a form letter. Just make a little effort.
Yeah.
And I'm going to respond. Whether I meet with you is another thing, but at least I'll respond and say, give you some feedback.
I think the simplest thing is just look at someone's portfolio.
Right.
Like Ray Tonsing said, he got a cold note from somebody. They're like, look, I saw you invested in these 3 things, which means you probably believe this, and that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Like, okay. Like, you looked at what I invest in. You're right. This is what I'm interested. Like, this is cool.
Well, I tweet about climate change a lot. So if you're starting, not that I'm going to fund a social good, climate change fighting company, but I'm interested in that area, and you can see it from what I say online. And I know it sounds like it's not egotistical. It's just, for me to say this, it's just smart. When I was pitching, VCs for my 2 companies, I would research the VCs and be ready to come in and say, hey, I saw that you're X, or, you went to X college, or you traveled to X place, and be able to kind of add to the conversation.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't know how hard the game is when they start.
Right.
Like, that's been my experience with entrepreneurs outside the Valley too, how hard, when you're walking into a meeting, the odds of your being funded are 1 in 2,000 or something like that. Yeah. Like, go buy a lottery ticket.
Right, it sucks.
And you walk out of, somebody did a great blog post that I've never been able to find, but they went through the different where, like, you take a meeting, you think there's a 10% chance you'll be funded, but there's actually like a 0%. Second meeting, you think it's 50, and it goes all the way through. And then you get to the term sheet, you're like 100%, and it's like, no, it's still 70 or whatever it is.
Right.
So the odds are just so against you when you walk into these meetings, and like, to not then be at the top level of just like crushing it have exactly the idea, stroke the ego of the VC.
Can't say that again. You can't say crushing it.
No offense. Oh, that's right. That is a dude.
You're going to lose all your female listeners.
That's a lot of female listeners. And Google had their version of it, which is, what superhero do you want to be?
Right.
And the women were like, I didn't read fucking comic books.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Not because I don't know, because I didn't read the dumb comic books.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's still, I'm thrilled that my partner is one of the founders of All Raise, right? It's been great. They're doing amazing work. And so I think that we have a long way to go, but, and I do want to come back to mental health because I do have a lot to say on that if you're interested in hearing it. But I think that it is, I always say, like, to your point about how do you respond when you receive emails from people of different, like, ethnicities and genders and, geographies, and I am more likely to meet with an underrepresented entrepreneur, but the bar is still high. So if a high bar, but maybe they didn't do everything right in the email, everything right from my perspective, I'm more likely to at least meet or talk to them because I want to increase the diversity of our portfolio. Right. But the bar is still the same.
What do you think about public health or mental health? Public health crisis. Health. What's your solution?
That's a whole separate thing, right? There is no like central like infrastructure for the venture capital industry. There's no like a body that says, okay, we're going to have industry-wide programs that help, entrepreneurs. It doesn't exist, right? So All Raise is as close as you can get to helping women, but there's no like, and so what happens is that it's incumbent on us, each of the firms to do things that are helpful, whatever it is, to give back, right? And so one of the ways so Jenny has been amazing and focusing on gender diversity and helping women, and I have been spending my time recently trying to figure out how we can help founders deal with mental health issues that come up while they're founders, and even
how can you help them?
Well, it's therapy is kind of broken, so it's not like you can just say, "Hey, we'll pay for your therapist." It's also time intensive, and so, but there are a couple of things. So, how we can help them is by trying things, piloting programs, and seeing how they work. Because we don't no one has the answer. We certainly don't, but we certainly have answers where we want to try with our founders, and so. Without going into too much detail, I'm going to write about this, and it's going to happen in the next 30 days. And it's kind of going to be how we're starting, what the initial pilots look like we're going to launch some things for our founders initially. And we've already tested a few of the ideas. And it's focusing, we're going to focus first on depression and anxiety. Stress and burnout feed into those things, but depression and anxiety. And we have a couple of programs we're going to try. One is both are very different. Both they can work hand in hand together. One involves a lot of software, and one is like humans and like experiential. And none of them involve ayahuasca. I'm waiting for that question from Kent. Nice. But I'm excited about that. I'm excited about being able to offer this and to offer it in a wrapper that makes it really easy and simple for entrepreneurs to take advantage of it. Yeah. And so we're dead serious about it. I've been in therapy for probably 20 years, individual therapy and couples therapy, and I kind of, there's so much being developed that leverages kind of new thinking now about mental health, whether it's, not just software. And I don't mean just like light software. How are you doing today? But deep software that intersects with therapy and intersects with meditation and other, we can do a lot more today and present it in a way that is palatable for founders because they're so busy. They can't go to therapy twice a week, like travel to an office somewhere, and they just won't do it.
Yeah. Oh. Do you meditate?
Every day.
It's funny. The number of people, Jerry Colonna was in here, but the number of people like hedge fund, you'd think titans of the universe, like badass, they're dudes, it happens, but who are like, TM, 20 years, Howard Stern. I started doing TM 20 years ago. That's I'd be dead if I didn't. Yeah. I'm shocked by the number of times I've heard it.
Well, it's the great thing about Calm and Headspace and some of their meditation apps is that let you off the hook of having to do like 35 minutes of meditation every day, which is what we were all told and how I started. And then I just quit because I'm not going to do 35 minutes a day. Yeah. And they let you ease in. And so the secret to meditation is for most people is like, start out with 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then when it's not work, add a minute. Yeah. Add a minute. And maybe you end up at 20 minutes, but you're getting there on your own pace and you're doing it in a way that where it isn't work because you're choosing when to add more time. Yeah. And then you kind of get into the habit of it. And, I do it in the morning when I wake up and it works for me.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, we've covered the waterfront here. What are you, so what are you looking forward to? You've successful venture capitalist, successful entrepreneur, you have a new girlfriend, right?
Yeah, I do.
Burning Man, lovely. Like, what do you, as you look forward to the next sort of 10 years, are you like, man, I got to fix the climate or I help women in tech or what are you optimistic about?
Well, I'm generally an optimist. That's kind of my MO from like even back to my childhood, but it's harder now. It's a little harder now. Our state is under attack from the elements, right? So that's, and also we have a number of structural problems that are only going to get worse. Yeah. And so, I had dinner with a friend who works, at Walmart, small. He has this big job at Walmart, and I was like, "What would you think about? What if you could become the CEO of what is the most important institution in our state right now, outside of the governor, the governor's office, and it's PG&E?
Yeah, right.
Like, what can we fix this? That's going to have the greatest impact on this whole state, and even as a beacon for the other states. Yeah. And I was trying to talk him into becoming the CEO of PG&E. Now, right now, PG&E is a public company. It's not possible, but it may end up being taken over by the state. And if that happens, that's going to get a lot of attention it should get a lot of attention from all of us who live here. Yeah. And so I ended up spending half an hour trying to talk my friend into taking over the job as CEO of PG&E. So I do spend a lot of time now thinking, I've started a climate change nonprofit called #Climate. It was exciting. I then kind of trying to talk people into worrying about climate was like fruitless. And so I kind of put it on the back burner. And now I'm coming back to kind of thinking about climate again. And so I'm hoping that people are more open to it and we can actually have more of an impact now. Yeah. So I think that's an area where I'm spending a lot of my time outside of work. Mental health also, I think that there's a lot of good happening in mental health right now. And I think it's still stigmatized, but it's never been less stigmatized than it is now. So I'm optimistic about that. I am not optimistic about politics. I don't know what to do there. I guess I'm not focused on that at the moment, even though I probably should be. Yeah. I'm excited about, kind of building, kind of a new life outside of work. I'm enjoying that. I've got amazingly 2 kids in college.
That is incredible.
I know, crazy. And 1 young one. But I love what you're doing here, and I want to. You bring up the tough issues.
It's weird when you're a white guy. Yeah. I had a weird conversation with, not weird, Charles Hudson. Yeah. And in the middle of it, what's it like to be a black VC?
Right. Right.
And he was like, I can tell you were really worried about asking me that because you're like, is Charles Hudson just fucking tired of talking about being a black? Maybe he just wants to talk about climate change or something. Right. And he had to kind of let me off the hook. So it is kind of weird being the guy that's the problem, or the prototype of the guy that's the problem. Right. But I can do a podcast, so maybe I can help with that because tens of thousands of people around the world listen.
It's an incumbent on all of us to use whatever pulpit we have to make a difference especially in this area because we can make a difference. Yeah. And I remember meeting Zinmo Valley. I was meeting a friend of mine who's also a black venture capitalist, and I think in the beginning, we didn't know each other very well. And I forget how this came up. It's before we were friends and someone introduced us. And I don't know if I knew that he was black. And we were meeting up and I'm like, how will I find you? He's like, don't worry.
Black guy in Mill
Don't
Valley.
worry. I'm the only one. And we've become friends ever since. And so I think we can't imagine what it's like to go through life. All we can do is be sensitive, empathic, and do our part, right? It's like, being a Jew in the South. My cousin wrote a book on, what I did on Sundays, whenever all of his friends were at church. And and it was very real for him, even though he's a white dude. So it's like, there are certain groups that have a more challenging time because it's obvious they're not white, right? Yeah. So my cousin, many people would mistake him for being Christian, and so he was able to hide behind that. Right. It's not possible if you're, black or a woman or, and so there is a big difference there.
Yeah. And the gay one, you can hide that, but then you shouldn't have to. Right. I just talked to Dave Hornick. Yeah. It's not out yet, but he talks about that. And you're like, oh yeah, that's a whole nother category of people that have their issues in Silicon Valley. It's
funny. We were thinking about it. It's like I met with, this is like 2.5 years ago, I met with these two entrepreneurs in Durham. They're both they were graduates of Duke, and they're both athletes, and they had they started this company called Fathom out of a fail. They basically, as athletes, their careers ended because they had all these injuries, and they wanted to make sure that no athlete had to deal with that again, right? At least minimize that. And they started this company, and I really liked the company, and I met with them. We're at this. They wanted to go meet at a bar, which is like here you would never do it now because they're 23-year-old women, and they chose the spot. And I'm like, okay, they know Durham. So when we sat down, they ordered a drink, and I looked at them and I said, oh shit, are you guys of age? So my first fear was I'm buying, no, we're 23, we're fine, and we chose this place. You're good. And then we're talking, and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys are a couple. I had no idea. Yeah. And they were the founders of the company. Yeah. And they were like, no one's ever said that to us. And I wonder if people have thought it and not said it. And we want people to say it. And we ended up investing in them. And it's been a great relationship since, for the last 2.5 years. Wow. But it was unusual. Back to your point about, I think being able to ask Charles that question, me being able to ask these two founders that question, with the right intention. Yeah. It's all about the intention. So my intention was good. Your intention was good. I think you can ask whatever you want for the most part if your intentions are good.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So how do people get in touch with you? Or how do they can follow you on Twitter, and they should.
Right.
It's a bunch of fun.
Right. So following me, on Twitter certainly is a way, but it's, I haven't figured this out. So this is a dilemma for all of us that are in this position of power because we're handing out these checks. Yeah. And as humble as you may be, Kent, and I try and remember, I know I was a founder. I received 50 no's for my two companies from VCs. I haven't figured this out yet. So what I would say is that it's not hard to figure out our email address, right? My email address. You can go to our website, you can see where we are. But so WAG is an example of a company that the founders reached out to us unsolicited, and they did a really good job of connecting with me and my background and describing their business in a way that I could really get, and we invested. Yeah. So figure that out. There's a way, we're humans. Remember that we're humans. Remember that we receive thousands of inquiries, but we're still human. And so connect to the human part of us, and it's more likely we're going to respond.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for doing this.
You got it. It's a pleasure.
All right. Josh Felser is my guest. This has been the Something About Your podcast. Talk to you next time.